The ethereal Stevie Nicks, queen of Fleetwood Mac, would float gracefully from one stage to another while dressed in velvet capes and platform boots. There was an explosive, passionate, and destructive collision of these two realms. Their romance was far from magical when it happened behind the scenes. In the midst of anarchy, addiction, and emotional scars, Joe and Stevie's passion ignited rapidly. She used to rush after him as if he were her lifeline, he was that important to her. The public was blinded to the more sinister aspects, such as the emotional blackmail, envy, and cocaine-fueled, never-ending feuds. Even though it has taken decades, Joe Walsh has spoken out today. However, the fantasy lover's expectations were not met by his revelations. Instead of depicting Stevie as a goddess straight out of a fairy tale, he shows her as a difficult, demanding, and tormented lady whose problems impacted everyone around her. The truth was more sinister, even though Stevie Nicks had referred to Joe Walsh as the love of her life. Substance misuse and erratic emotional swings plagued their relationship, which escalated into an obsession. Think about this. Rooms in the hotel destroyed by yelling brawls, drug-induced paranoia, and broken promises before dawn. Joe was the center of Stevie's universe, and she clung to him desperately. Unfortunately, Joe saw that their love wasn't helping. It devoured. Whether she was manipulative or had an emotional outburst, he was helpless to control her. He was hardly able to keep himself together, but she needed saving. It was a bittersweet ending. Nobody respected one another, and there was no amicable farewell. Traces of devastation, animosity, and quietness followed. After Joe left, Stevie felt as though the pain of her loss had never fully healed. And she ensured that everyone else felt it as well. Joe Walsh wasn't the only one who got caught up in the waves. Disarray in the world of Stevie Nicks. Her orbit was both magnetic and unpredictable. Using magic and charisma to entice others, only to set them on fire emotionally. She accomplished more than merely amass platinum records throughout the years. She was a hoarder of resentment, shattered pride, and unfinished feuds. You may already be aware of the strained relationship she has had with the Pretenders' Chrissie Hynde. The mutual adoration between the two strong female rock stars soon turned into cold words and piercing stares. Chrissie, who was unfiltered and urbane, didn't believe Stevie's ethereal story. She made fun of the shawls. She is accused of hiding behind a created character due to the veils and theatrics. In spite of his injuries and defensiveness, Stevie would not back down. Cryoprene filled the space between them. It became necessary to position the changing rooms on opposite sides of the arena, turning festivals into battle zones. There was nothing I could do. My confidence in my comedic abilities was shot. At first, I didn't believe I had what it took to compose music. Next, The War Without Sound. Alongside Belinda Carlisle. Reportedly, in the mid-1980s, when Stevie's solo career was struggling for survival, she accused Belinda of trying to steal her thunder by imitating her ethereal manner, which she had established her image from Heartbreak and Velvet. Backstage yelling battles, harsh looks during award events, and interviews with barely concealed insults were all things that industry insiders spoke about. The rivalry between the two women was visible in every interaction, even if they both smiled for the cameras. Those closest to Stevie betrayed him more than anybody else, even more than his enemies. Lori Nicks and Sharon Solani, who had previously performed as her backing singers, were integral to her performance. They were inseparable, harmonious soulmates, sisters. They were inseparable for a long time, performing all around the globe, carrying each other through the highs and lows of fame. However, the fissures spread gradually. Stevie's expectations were too much for her to handle, and her moods became erratic. She would go from sobbing into their arms one moment to utterly ignoring them the next. Claims of squabbles involving credit, money, and control of the backstage area circulated. The roles of caretaker and shadow were too much for Lori and Sharon to bear. Silence, the sum of 100 little betrayals, broke the link, not in a single explosive moment. The kind of stillness that is caused by sadness rather than animosity. Stevie's journey in the music industry wasn't without its bumps. Beside it lay the lifeless forms of doomed friendships, poisoned alliances, and unending feuds. And her onstage grin never changed, no matter how many years passed. The only way for those who had fought with her, or against her to live was to adore Stevie Nicks. For as long as anyone could remember, Fleetwood Mac fans thought Stevie and Christine McVie were sisters. Two women who, on the outside, appeared to be united among a tempest of male egos and pandemonium backstage were the steadying influence in a band that was perpetually on the brink of collapse. Their love, however, was not without its storms behind the scenes. Imagine a kingdom ruled by two queens. A power conflict was certain to occur at some point. Christine privately accused Stevie of being egocentric, untrustworthy, and tough to work with in the early 1990s, when the band was dissolving due to musical discord and personal problems. Stevie allegedly told her that Fleetwood Mac was just a side project that she could add or remove from her solo career whenever she wanted. Their once warm relationship has now cooled into a subtle animosity. Christine, in Stevie's view, was emotionally distant, passive-aggressive, and empathetically absent. At her lowest points in her addiction, when she thought Christine had emotionally checked out, she felt the most abandoned. A chilly professional tolerance replaced their previously profound friendship. During the time record era in the mid-90s, the strain reached a boiling point, a project. The band apparently received an ultimatum from Christine, whom the two women secretly despised. She would depart if Stevie persisted. The air was poisonous. Discussions morphed into grillings. It was like navigating a minefield when we were recording. After a long absence, Christine made her long-awaited return to Fleetwood Mac in 2014. Fans had high hopes for a reunion of simpatico, but the scars had not yet healed. Reportedly, Stevie demanded complete artistic control over the tour's direction. Many of Christine's suggestions were either ignored or altered to suit Stevie's taste. Everything was depleted. Like old times, the two harmonized, grinned, and danced on stage. However, the eerie quiet offstage said volumes. Almost seldom did they share a dressing room, they always traveled independently and stayed at separate motels. What the audience viewed as a sign of sisterhood was actually an elaborate hoax maintained for the benefit of sentimentality and ticket revenue. Their rift was quiet and explosive, yet it was heartbreakingly cold and deliberate. One of the saddest undercurrents in Fleetwood Mac was the gradual breakdown of their friendship. A subtle feud between two ladies who were formerly supportive of one another but are now estranged due to years of hurt, humiliation, and unfinished treachery. When Stevie Nicks was out of the spotlight, his private life was a labyrinth of unspoken hurts, anxieties, and emotional baggage. Eyeliner, leather boots, and a microphone were Stevie's rebellious expressions as she was born into a rigid and self-conscious family. The strain on her bond with her father, Jess Nicks, was one area where her defiance manifested itself. Discipline, structure, and conventional duties were important to Jess, a prosperous businessman. A sense of disdain washed over him as he saw his daughter become a magical rock icon. He failed to grasp her insatiable desire for music, disorder, and independence, and he never satisfied it. Even among relatives, their debates were legendary. Jess was always picking on her, whether it was her job choices, her looks, or her inability to commit. In the 1980s, as Stevie's addiction progressed, Jess emotionally distanced himself. To him, it was a sign of weakness, not pain. His attempts at intervention, when they occurred, came out as more controlling than compassionate. Injured and enraged, Stevie shoved him farther away. Bab's mom, Barbara, was kinder and more patient. The stardom of her daughter was a burden for her as well. Barbara wished Stevie a peaceful existence free of the chaos of tour dates, exes, controversies, and broken sleep. The burden Stevie bore remained a mystery to her, even as she shielded her kid from naysayers. Stevie, on the other hand, yearned for judgment that never materialized. The atmosphere would tense up whenever she walked in over the holidays. The beautiful actress, who bore no resemblance to the tiny girl their relatives recalled, left them speechless. The loneliness intensified as Stevie was confronted with a life-altering choice. Her pregnancy occurred in the late 1970s, while she was having an erratic relationship with Don Henley. Stevie decided to have an abortion because she was afraid having a child would make her profession and her life unmanageable. Emotionally, she never got over it. Decades later, in interviews, she acknowledged that the decision troubled her, that she pondered the possibilities. Stevie was a strong, autonomous individual in the eyes of the world. In her heart, though, she lamented the love that eluded her, the family she was never truly connected to, and the children she would never have. Her notoriety served as both an insurance policy and a constraint. With the help of stage lights and platinum records, she constructed walls. However, a lady secretly yearning for connection resided within those walls. The real Stevie, the one hiding behind all the cosmetics and scarves, was never fully supported by her family, even though she was surrounded by splendor. Perhaps that's why, even at the height of her success, she frequently felt like a young woman attempting to win over those who doubted her abilities to achieve it alone. There was no smoldering period in Stevie Nicks' life like her conflict with Lindsey Buckingham. This is like Fleetwood Mac's curse that never ends. A mesmerizing and excruciating creative dance unfolded between two soulmates. Despite their obvious chemistry on stage, their relationship was marred by years of emotional battles, treachery, and unhealed scars. They first became romantically involved in the late 1960s, when they were both aspiring musicians living on the edge of stardom. They climbed the ladder of success in the rock industry side by side, creatively bound and inseparable. However, their emotional stability started to deteriorate as they progressed further into the sector. Personal tensions between Stevie and Lindsey had begun to boil over in the mid-1970s, when Fleetwood Mac was at the height of their commercial success. Night after night, they had to perform, barely touching as they stood inches apart on stage and sang songs laden with coded anger and sadness. A weapon was made out of every lyric. Behind every harmony was a disagreement. Their performances resembled psychological theater rather than music. Anxieties over Stevie's blossoming solo success in the 80s ratcheted up Lindsey's resistance to his authority. Felt abandoned. She felt he was nasty and had a chilling effect on her. He said she had betrayed the band for the sake of her pride. The excruciating stress backstage, according to friends, was real. Doors slammed, walkouts or tears were common ways that recording sessions would finish. The notorious breakup of 2018 followed. The official version was light on details, but the reality was much darker. In a tribute to Fleetwood Mac, Stevie allegedly felt disrespected by Lindsey's actions. Those in the know within the band say she gave him the boot or she did it herself. Stevie is the boss. Lindsey had left. There was a subsequent media frenzy. There were lawsuits. A flurry of accusations was hurled about. This caught Lindsey off guard, he claimed. It was enough, Stevie said. There was a band rupture. Deep, long-sealed wounds broke apart. That was the moment when many fans' hopes of ever seeing the original lineup reunited were dashed. In the midst of platinum records and standing ovations, their narrative unfolded as a tragedy. As was Stevie herself, it was stunning, hideous, and unforgettable. But the lyrics they once sung to one another carry the weight of their broken and twisted relationship like an enduring ghost, even after all these years have passed. Now that decades have passed, the only thing left is the truth that nobody dared to speak out until Joe Walsh broke the quiet. A new light has emerged. No longer can Stevie's admirers act as if her life story was all sunshine and rainbows. Conflict, fueled by ego, and the harm she did and took were other stains. Undoubtedly, her impact is immense, yet it has an eerie presence. Burdened by the hushed voices, the friends she lost, and the debris she left behind in the wake of her storm. Joe's remarks have ushered in a new era of practicality, not imagination. There was a wake of shattered relationships, failed friendships, creative explosions, and individual sacrifices left by Stevie. She was beloved, hated, feared, and sometimes despised by those around her. What makes her unique is her unedited and complicated reality. For rock icons, she was more than simply a songwriting inspiration. As she stormed into rooms, demanding attention and occasionally paying the price in velvet, she was a lady like a hurricane. Her fame was not without its price, which she and everyone else who crossed her path had to pay.